Hello. Last night we had our big EM only tournament. You can watch that on Wormhole, see all these games in action. Today I'm just going to do a little follow-up video to show how these games work. But we're just going to take a quick look inside some of these games. Let's just see how they work. This is one of our two Gottlieb games, Big Brave, courtesy of John and Leslie. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. Got their little vertical shaft, little score motor here that helps calculate things. Got our bank of drop targets. That's a bit loud, maybe I won't do that again. And we've got our very target. That once it gets pushed back, comes forward, it's got this little set of contacts, and this little guy releases it. And of course we've got our things like our chimes. So that's Big Brave. Over here we'll move on to Super Score. It's my first game. Threw off a lot of people last night because it's very different than modern games, and that's got these pairs of flippers. They are paired up side by side, not right and left like you would hope. And with how that's set up, it can't easily be changed because there is just one coil that operates both flippers. They're hooked up with this linkage. So both those little 2-inch flippers go off of this. Same thing on the other side. And we've got that roulette wheel that gave out 95% of the points here in the middle, which is actually pretty simple looking from underneath, but I'm sure has quite a bunch of little switches and stuff inside. And one fun thing with games of this era, for Gottlieb at least, is that your flipper buttons down here, it just moves to this arm. To save a bit of wiring, the actual switches are up here under the board, under the playfield. And same over here. So that's the actual little flipper units in action. And this has a feature that only lasts a couple years, fortunately, because when you need to lift the playfield, it's got this giant locking bar under here that you have to reach through the coin door and pull to lift the playfield. Same sort of score motor like we saw. That was a Gottlieb thing. And I want to show you the little coil reset banks. That as you are racking up those different A and B bonuses, these get pulled in. And turn the game off so we don't have the bells going off, because they are quite loud. I do love the bells on this one though. A lot of EM games with bells only had 2 bells, one for the hundreds, and then another bell that's shared between the singles and the 10 points. But yes, but this one has 3 separate bells, one for each of those levels. So as these get tripped, it lights up your different values for a little roulette wheel. Well, once you collect a top value and it resets, this pulls in and resets all those switches to get it back to its starting state, or the state it was left in after the previous game, because it doesn't reset after a game. It carries over, and it carries over from player to player. This one down here is what resets at the beginning of a game. Contrast that, we've got these 2 separate banks there. To OXO next door. It has this absolutely massive reset bank here on the bottom, because on the board, on the playfield, you've got the tic-tac-toe board, which, as one of our younger players last night stated, was the most emotionally involved had been in a game of tic-tac-toe. Got emotionally invested because this thing can be frustrating. That tic-tac-toe board has all these different lights in it, because each little square can light up as either an X or an O. And so you've got one of these that trips for each square, and whether you get an O or an X, it trips a different relay. So you've got your 18 under there for just the X's and O's, and then this extra one for if you get your 3 in a row, get your 3 in a line there. And they all get reset after each ball. But it's big old, house current mains switch up here that resets the whole bank. We'll be looking at a lot of Williams games. They generally have the same setup of these big stepper units. That one of them will be how many players you have. One will be, which ball you've got in play, and that sort of thing. So we'll see that a lot. There are generally 2 down here in the body, and then 2 up in the head of the game. Then our only Williams game of the night, Captain Fantastic. Absolutely beautiful game, out in the play field that's fairly worn, but that just shows you it was a good and fun game to play. We had our double flippers on this side, which of course threw people off, but that's part of the fun, having things that are a bit out of the norm for new games. Got a similar setup to the Williams for having our 2 little stepper units here in the middle and all of our relays around it. Same similar sort of horizontally mounted score motor. The fun thing in here though, or the thing that I like for just being very witty, is that when you get to 100,000 points, you've got this buzzer that comes on. The buzzer comes on, you'd have your light that shows either over the top on the early models, or like this one, it lights up and it says 100,000 points. So, showing that, player 1, it's got 146 versus this one's 71,000 or whatever. Well, you want that buzzer to come on to signify that, yes, you've reached 100,000, but you don't want the buzzer to stay on. Instead of coming up with a whole other circuit for that, for the time delay, they've put in one of these 555 flashing bulbs that when you apply, power to them, they light up. But once they get hot enough, it's a little bimetallic strip or whatever, and the light turns off. Well, that is wired in through the hold circuit. So once the light turns itself off, it turns off the buzzer. So this will be loud, but I'll give you a little demonstration. So that's a really witty way they did it for making this buzzer here under the little tilt mechanism stay on for only a few seconds. Next door we've got Austin's lovely Grand Prix. I hit it off because it makes a little bit of a buzz. Not doing so much right now. We give it a little light underneath. Since it's got the 2 separate bonus systems, it's got a stepper here and another one up here for your right and left side. Whole lot of light bulbs underneath for all those different little things associated with the spinner and the bonus. During the stream, people were saying that it had some hopped up coils. I have not swapped out anything. Whether these are original or not, I don't know, but those are the coils that are in it. I did do a flipper rebuild kit on it, and that did significantly speed things up. This coil is different. I don't know what's original, what's not, but they sure work fine. We've got these 4 drop targets that are the little individual ones. We'll see a game further on that is much older, but the mechanism is going to be pretty similar, even though this one is quite a bit newer. The other one's not going to have this wire and a few things, and it's going to be all metal. These little guys like to wear out. This is what your spinner makes move underneath here to move these lights forward. So you have to clean and adjust these pretty well to get smooth operation. That's our Grand Prix. Nice shiny chime box. Next door, this game was not in the tournament since it's not an EM. It was very close. From 79. This one's actually dated 78. But circa 1933. Our little Allied Leisure brand cocktail game. Got some old computer work in there. It does not have any batteries because it does not have any RAM for storing your high score or anything. So, no battery damage. This is graciously fixed up by Upkick Pinball. They are lovely. Got a nice set of chimes here. It has high and low settings for the chimes, which actually just wires it in series with this extra coil there if you need them to be a little quieter. I think this is kind of an early production because this shares the same layout as like Roy Clark and a few other games from Allied Leisure. This has the older style boards that were like on Roy Clark. But it's got this Black Beauty cabinet. And underneath you'll see that it actually has the wiring marked out on the bottom of the playfield. This is something you'll see on some nice Williams games, things like Space Shuttle, or maybe that's Space Station. But some games will have this all underneath. Some more modern places like Deep Root claim that that is a new innovation, but you can see it here. Unfortunately, these guys used a lot of plastic, but seems to be holding up on this unit. Makes the flippers feel a little sluggish. Drop targets, people are having to 3D print parts for them, but we're still hanging on. We've got our lovely Mars Trek here, our only non-domestic game. So this was made in Spain with a lot of Williams parts though. So it's a lot of the same setup we've already seen, although the fittings are all metric. Got our reset bank over here, stepper units. Really lovely game how they put this stuff together. Their play fields and back glasses stay in amazing shape. Unfortunately, the cabinets are a different story. They use particle board. It's very heavy and the bottom all chips up, so it kind of hooked up this aluminum rail, which, if you ever try this, an 8-foot section of aluminum rail cut exactly in half will fit exactly between the legs. Worked out great. Hides most of the damage. There's a little bit sticking out up here, but it looks a whole lot better than it did when I got it. It's fun to see it here next to Jolly Roger. Much older Williams game, about 10 years older. And just how similar the cabinets are. Made in different companies by different manufacturers, but they've got the same coin door, just with a different casting for the logos. Inside this cabinet is very yellow, but we've got the same sort of system we've been seeing. Got the stepper units, different relays clustered all around. This may be the only home use only game we've got here. Of course, no way to verify that, but the guy I bought it from had bought it from a couple who had had it since at least the 70s, as evidenced by the lovely contact paper that was stuck all over the outside. They had already peeled it off the bottom, so we've got some of the cabinet artwork here, but with, you know, residue and damage from that contact paper. Great 1960s pointy people game. Well, not pointy people, but, you know, 60s artwork. Nothing too mechanically different in here, although this is from the era of change for how you turned on and off a game. It's got the old style kick switch, where you would kick the bottom of the game. There's a little weight under here, and the little inertia from you kicking the bottom would spring that weight up and break the hold power and turn the game off. Then you would light it back up by hitting the left flipper. This was the first Williams game to actually have the power switch we are familiar with mounted underneath the game, where you can turn it on and off using that. And then the fun thing with this one, I bought it off Craigslist. Inside the coin slot were all these coins, a few of which had a kid's name written on them. Went back on Facebook, found out the guy I'd bought it from had actually gone to high school with him. Didn't know it, but was able to share that the kid had, you know, stuffed the coin slot himself, but made sure he didn't get in trouble. It was just a fun story. This game, we've got Williams Pretty Baby here from the late 60s, well, the mid 60s. The other ones are late 60s. This is the oldest. It's the only one that has the extra little plunger to lift the ball up onto the playfield. The ball would come into this trough, be released. Some older games, you'd have like 5 balls, one for each ball in play. This one only has 1 ball that gets cycled over and over. You push that plunger, and it would lift it up to the playfield. And kind of make it just drop right back in there. Even though this one's much older, a lot of similar things. Same little kickoff switch we were talking about inside, but no separate power switch. This game has been well worn over the years. This is its good side. You can see the lockdown bar has physically worn all the way through there. Cosmetically in very bad shape. Not much left of this back glass, but still an awful lot of fun to play. And mechanically is in surprisingly good shape. And this has those very old drop targets I was talking about. Has some similarities to Grand Prix, but all metal. These little worn targets on them. Pretty neat to see a very early game with drop targets. Short little flippers and little latch mechanisms for holding the playfield down. Plastics are a pain because the screws go all the way through, so you have to like take everything apart to swap out your rings and plastics.